Mia Voss, guess who this is? Temple Grandin. I have been watching you in action for the last hour, answer questions with people, and it's been so fun to watch you do what you do. So great to see you here.
Well, it's great to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for agreeing to talk to me today. So we are here at the American Veterinary Medical Association Conference, AVMA.
Yep, that's what AVMA.
Yes, I knew I'd get the letters right. So tell me about your speech today.
Well, I talked about ways to reduce stress. And one of the main things I talked about is when an animal voluntarily cooperates with a veterinary procedure, like the dog cooperates with you at the veterinarian, or the horse will stand still when you're working on it, then you don't get a whole lot of fear stress. Right. When you force animals to do things, then you get huge amounts of fear stress. So the first principle is to acclimate animals to handling so that they're willing to voluntarily cooperate and not be forcing them.
The first thing I learned today is that stressed out animals poop more.
Yeah, that's one of the first things that happens. They poop more because you're scared to, what out of them.
That's right.
And in horses and cattle, when you start to see the tail switching and the eyes white
the
show,
white eyes, that's right.
That animal is really starting to get afraid.
So what was interesting at that presentation today, too, is that it was all obviously veterinary students or people who have been in that field. And I'm not in that field, but animal welfare is a huge, important thing for me. So it was great to see the combination. I mean, you were really educating people on the simplicity of it, that not only from a heartstring point, but from just from the animal and for business and just overall, taking better care of these animals. It's overall such a better thing for them.
Well, there's a lot of simple things that you can do, like when you're doing a veterinary procedure. I mean, give the dog a non-slip mat to stand on so he's not bracing like that. The horse starts to panic if he starts to slip. Cattle will start to panic if they're slipping.
Sure.
Non-slip flooring is extremely important.
Now, has it been, you're so popular, everybody loves your message. You have such a great sense of humor as well. I don't think people realize that when you speak, you infuse this very quiet humor into it. So kudos to you because it gets their attention. Yeah. But it's easier now to get people to listen to your message because you've been so tireless for, over 30 years with this.
Well, when I first started out in the 70s, handling of cattle was absolutely atrocious.
I bet it was brutal.
Every animal was zapped with an electric prod multiple times, people screaming, yelling, hitting them. It was completely horrible.
Can't imagine.
Things have really changed. In the last 10 years, there's been a lot of improvements in handling.
Yes.
In fact, my student, Ruth Wollywody, did a survey of 28 feed yards to look at handling. And about 20% of those yards used no electric prod at all. So things have gotten a whole lot better.
Yes, and that's definitely because of you. You've made it very systematic. You talked about that in your presentation, that you're working with Wendy's, McDonald's. I know you're working with Costco, and you said you brought these executives out into the field to say, here's what this looks like, right?
Well, when I first started working with McDonald's in 1999, I took executives from McDonald's, Wendy's, and a number of other companies on their first trips to farms and slaughter plants. And the thing is, things were not as bad as some of the activists say it is.
Right.
But I remember the day when one of those executives saw a half-dead dairy cow go in their product, and they're going, whoa, there's some things here that we really need to change. And if you've ever seen that show, Undercover Boss,
yes,
there were some true undercover boss moments.
Sure.
Where eyes were getting opened up, and they're going, yeah, there are some things we're going to have to change.
You said a lot of them need to all go to that and just go through that process.
I think that executives from many different companies need to get out and see things in the field. Also, I'm very concerned where government's going. You've got too many kids that get a degree in poli-science, go work for a senator, then go work for a lobbying group, and whatever thing that they're legislating and activating about, they have absolutely no practical experience with it.
Right. They don't have any skin in the game, right?
We're just getting into a whole bunch of extremism on both sides, and nothing's getting done.
Right, there's nothing in the middle. And here's what I also liked about your speech today, too, that was really eye-opening for me. And because I'm so concerned with the welfare side of it, you drew it back even to more of not even the conditions, but the actual physical condition of the animal, like if it's overbred or genetics type of thing, of that, that it's not even, it's from bad, it goes from worse to maybe a little bit better if the conditions are better, but if the animal itself has been bred poorly, I just thought that was so interesting.
I am very concerned about what I call biological system overload.
Yes.
You can get this in dogs. And a good example is the bulldog. I think the bulldog's a monstrosity. It can't breathe.
Missed it.
It can't walk. It can't have its babies naturally. Laying hens, when they get old, have 20 to 50% osteoporosis and broken bones because she's put everything into her eggs. Even if I put her up in the Ritz Carlton, I'm only going to go from atrocious to poor.
That's right. And she showed a couple pictures in the presentation that showed the bulldog. I love that, from like 40 or gosh, probably 80 years ago, and the bulldog now. So yeah, it is just kind of a hot mess.
You can look up online. It's called Bulldog's Dilemma. It's from the 1938 New York Times. And this bulldog's actually got a snout. It's got some legs.
That's right.
So how did we get into a mess like that? Well, they just kept breeding for a verbal standard. Should have had a photographic standard.
Yes.
The other thing is dairy cows, for example, have very high amounts of lameness. We've bred for more and more productivity. I think we have to look at what's optimal, not what's maximum. Because there's always trade-offs. Get too much productivity, you're probably going to lose immune function.
How tough was that in the very beginning when you were coming to these people in the 70s before, they really had kind of drank the Kool-Aid of what you've been preaching, and they were probably like, who are you? And you are cutting into my profit with this message.
I found that selling the equipment was much easier than getting people to operate it right. People want the magic thing. I found that selling the fancy new cattle handling facility was really quite easy. But about half my clients in the 70s did really bad things in that facility.
That's right.
What I find is people want the thing more than they want paying attention to the details of management. And the older I get, the more I'm getting into the management of things.
Which I like. And I know, I want to segue real quick. I watched your TED Talk from 2010, so it's now been 4 years. It's almost at 3 million views, by the way. Crazy that so many people are watching. It's a 20-minute TED Talk, and you do talk a lot about that with the difference. I'm going to segue to the autistic mind with details, and that kind of gets missed for a lot of people. There's like a bigger picture thing. So talk to me about your speech at the TED Talks and just more of like the detail mind.
Well, I am a photorealistic visual thinker, and in my TED Talk, there's the kids that are kind of quirky and different. They might get labeled Asperger's, autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, whatever. And some kids have the visual thinking, the photorealistic visual mind.
Right.
Then there's other kids, they're the pattern thinker. They're more the mathematical mind. These are your programmers. Then you have the kids that are the word mind. Well, you need to have these visual thinkers like me.
Right.
Because when Fukushima melted down, I was horrified to find out they made a visual thinking mistake I would have never made. They put all their emergency equipment in a non-waterproof basement. Some simple waterproof doors would have fixed that problem. It would not have happened. Crank them shut like on the submarine, it would not have happened.
And thank you for being so patient. I've got a bunch of things going on because I have some people in the audience. They've been waiting and they have some questions for you.
Okay, fine.
So I'm going to pull it up from the phone, and I love that bigger picture of seeing things more detailed. They're right. It's in pictures that people just don't see at all. So this is a gal named Veronica Foley. Hi, Veronica. She says, I'm very interested in your opinions about diagnosis, labeling of high-functioning kids on the spectrum. Her kids are in middle school, and as you imagine, there's a lot of diagnosis for a math genius, music whiz daughter, but there's been a functional issue that led to the need for one. She said, I've definitely seen situations where friends of theirs were diagnosed and treatment actually seems to make the situation more extreme. Maybe, so I don't know if that's too much of a question for you. She says, I just worry about the age of helicopter parenting, that parents don't need one more excuse not to make their kids do the things that don't come to them naturally.
I'm concerned about some of these kids on the real high end of the autism spectrum, fully verbal, smart kids, maybe gifted in something like math, maybe gifted in something like art or music.
Yes.
And nothing's being done to develop their strengths. Now, the way to get social interactions through shared interests. My ability in art was always encouraged. Right. And when I was in high school, the only places I was not bullied and teased, where I had friends, was horseback riding, model rocket club, and electronics. You want to get kids into specialized interest things. But I'm seeing too many kids getting overprotected. They're not learning how to shake hands, how to shop, how to greet people. When I was 7 and 8 years old, I had to put on my good clothes and be my mother's little party hostess.
Right.
And that was used to teach me how to greet people. Also, we did a lot of turn taking with board games. These were simple things to do.
I read that, actually you mentioned that in the TED Talk. You talked about that. That's an age. I grew up in the 60s. You grew up in the 50s. We were taught these things. These were
all kids
things.
Were taught these things.
And you said you worked in a store. Did you work in a dress shop when you were
I worked when I was 13. My mother arranged a little job for me. There was a dressmaker that worked out of her home doing custom freelance dressmaking, and I hand hemmed dresses and took apart garments for her. Started out as a volunteer job. She liked me so much she started paying me. But you see, there's a discipline and a responsibility of work. We need to be finding paper route substitutes for these kids. They've got to learn that discipline and responsibility. How about walking dogs for the next door neighbors, not your own dog? It needs to be outside the home. How about setting up chairs at the church every Saturday afternoon? You've got to do it every Saturday. How about working in the farmer's market on the weekends? These are things that you can just set up in the community.
Yes, absolutely. As I like to say, everybody, preach it, because that is such a message that I preach. Now, do you feel like since you've done that TED Talk, has there been more of a move towards that? Because you spoke on it so eloquently, like talking about that, a lack of art in the schools and things like that.
I think taking out all the hands-on classes is the worst thing schools ever did.
Yeah.
Because how can a kid find out he likes music or likes art or likes theater if he doesn't get a chance to do it? I had students, regular students at Michigan State University one time. I did an environmental management class. That's the kind of class where kids are floundering around in school, so they try out that class. And they asked me, how did I get passionate about cattle? I was exposed to them in high school.
That's right.
You're only going to get interested in things you get exposed to. And what I'm seeing out there is I'm seeing the kids where the parents are really getting the message, they're getting the kids really developed well.
Right.
Then I'm seeing another kind of helicopter parent where the mom shows up with a 10-year-old, she's doing all the talking, and the teenagers, some of them are getting addicted to video games.
Right.
I'm too often hearing, he's 18, I can't get him out of the basement. He's 21, I can't get him out of the bedroom. And one place where everybody drew a line in the sand with me, when I was a teenager in my 20s, I could not become a recluse in my room.
Right. Right, and that I remember seeing that in the movie when you went to visit your aunt, and that was the first time when you saw the cowboy that had the hat and they had the visual, and I think that was when you were talking about the image with the shoes that they kept you.
Well, they did a really good job in that movie of showing how my visual thinking mind works.
Amazing.
They did a fantastic job with that. All my projects were accurate because I'm really into work stuff. Because what makes me crazy is I'm seeing one kind of geeky, nerdy kid in Silicon Valley. He's going down a great route, went to a Montessori school, gets apprenticed into the computer field. And then I'm seeing another kid, he's got an Asperger label, he's sitting at home playing video games. And then when he's in his early 20s, he's getting on Social Security. And they're the same geeky kid. And then I go to a meatpacking plant, and there's old gray-haired hippie who runs a maintenance shop that I know's on the spectrum.
Right, right. And you said that in your interview that you felt like on the set there were a lot of spectrum.
Yes. And the thing is, how do you get into jobs? A lot of these people interview badly. We've got to short circuit that process and find the back doors. I got into both of my degree programs through the back door. And the way I did it was showing off a portfolio of my work.
Your drawings,
I'd show off my drawings, I'd show off pictures. You sell your work rather than selling yourself.
Yes.
I started out freelance, one little tiny job at a time.
I love the story too about your professor. The one that did it with the horse, when he came into the class, he knew he was trying to figure out a way for you to reach and for you to connect with your class. And I can't remember, is it Crofton?
Well, Mr. Carlock, and
yes.
And I really did build that optical illusion room. In fact, in the movie,
Amazing.
They showed the actual clip of the movie that I saw when I was in high school. That again, you got to show kids interesting stuff to get them interested in interesting stuff.
Yes.
And that's how I got interested in optical illusion rooms.
Well, and we need more of that of the professors that are not just going to go the rote route, and where we'll recognize that and say these are some things that kids would need to be interested in. They can't. They're going to recognize.
Well, let's take Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Starship Enterprise. How did he get in? How did that actor get into that role? Well, when he was in 6th grade, he was saved by the school play. That's where he discovered that theater was what he wanted to do.
Yes.
If he hadn't been exposed to that, he would have never become, Jean-Luc Picard.
Exactly. And thank you, dear Lord, that he did, because he did an amazing job. I know, Greg, you had wanted to ask Dr. Grandin, this is Greg Boysell, by the way, and he was very excited to meet you. He said, wait, who are you going to go meet? I've watched that movie 20 times, so he's seen it more than I have. Did you feel like it was you wanted to know if it was an accurate portrayal of her?
Yeah, I just, was curious on how accurate it was portrayed.
Parts of it.
How involved you were in the filming and producing it.
I was very involved with Emily Gerson Sainz, the producer, who's a mother of an autistic child and wanted to be right, and with Mick Jackson and the writers. And all of the visual thinking, sensory stuff, and all my work stuff was shown very accurately. There are some events they had to compress and switch around. but all the main characters are real. Anne and Mr. Carlock.
Yes.
My mother was beautifully portrayed by Julia Ormond. She did a fantastic job on that. And I did go down on the set to make sure the cattle stuff went right.
I saw that, and I heard you talk about that in your speech today, that when they didn't get that right with the
Well,
little
the
shield
thing is, they were doing some publicity photos, and they had a
Right.
team, Halter Broke, trained to lead heifer, and we got down to take a publicity picture, and the heifer started looking at me. Next thing you know, she's rearing up to jump on top of me, and they were flipping these reflector boards around.
Right.
And you see, this is where animal thinking is very specific. A white truck going by is not the same as a 4x8 white styrofoam panel getting flipped around.
Right, because it moves differently.
It
you
moves
said.
differently. You see, when you think in words, you tend to overgeneralize. But that heifer was just freaking out at that white panel.
How did they find out about you? I didn't know that part, because I know I read that book, the one that it's based on, probably 15 years ago.
Well,
how did they
Emily
come across your
Gerson
story?
Sains is an acting agent in New York, and she has a severely autistic kid, and she read my book, Thinking in Pictures. And then she came and approached me about doing a movie. And it took 10 years to get the right team of people put
Wow.
together that knew what to do with the story.
Sure. How did that change your life, having it come out in a movie?
Oh boy, it's made me like 10,000 times busier.
I bet. Well, and you're going to Iowa on Monday. And then
I'm
you're
going to Boise, actually going to
Idaho,
Boise, and then
Idaho.
I'm going on to Germany because I'm doing some animal welfare training with McDonald's.
Which I love. Thank you for that. I so appreciate it. What are you more busy with? More with the teaching and the animal welfare, or with the advocacy for autism?
Autism would totally take over if I let it, but I'm not going to let it.
Okay.
I have two reasons for that. I really, really enjoy all the things I do with cattle and with pigs. The other reason is I think I'm a better role model to kids on the spectrum as a college professor rather than an advocate. I'm seeing too many kids where autism is becoming their fixation. When I was a
title.
teenager, it was cattle, it was optical illusion rooms, it was feed yards and things like that was the stuff that I was fixated on. Things that could turn into work.
Okay.
You know, the autism advocacy is an important thing in what I do.
But you're living by example. I was wondering about that. That's fantastic.
I have to work to not let autism totally take over, and I've actually said, okay, I'll do an autism talk, but you get the Cattlemen's Association to contact
Sure.
me so we can do something with livestock. Okay, and I've done veterinary conferences. I do a lot of veterinary conferences, and then we also will do an autism talk. In fact, I'll ask to have them set up an autism talk. But I get worried when 10-year-olds walk up to me. These are fully verbal 10-year-olds, and all they want to do is talk to me about their autism. See, one of the problems we've got is autism is such a big spectrum, especially since they changed the diagnostic criteria in 2013. One end of it, you've got brilliant geniuses like Silicon Valley, and at the other end, you've got a very severely handicapped, nonverbal with all kinds of medical problems maybe on top of the autism.
Right.
It's this huge spectrum now that's all called autism. I think
Yeah.
the DSM latest version in 2013 is a big mistake.
And it did seem like it maybe just made it way too broad.
Oh, it's way too broad.
And then I hear it, and when I was doing research before today, I was thinking that because you were talking about the Asperger's and the spectrum when you talked about the Silicon Valley, but then you also mentioned that there's people that's completely not applicable
Well, yeah, see,
to.
before they changed it, you had the Asperger's, which is basically socially awkward with no speech delay. Now, I had severe speech delay, so
Right.
I would be labeled autistic. But they took out all the speech stuff, which I think was a mistake, because the ICD, the International Classification of Diseases, the international guideline, their proposal, and it's still in their proposal stage, is to have 4 levels for autism. The Asperger type, no speech delay, no intellectual impairment. Then the bottom would be impaired speech and impaired intellectually. And then you got my type, which in the middle, which would be speech delay with no intellectual impairment.
Right.
And that makes a lot more sense from the standpoint of education and services.
I really like this distinction, though, and I was thinking about that for you, of what would you get kind of eclipsed with the work that you do. See, now you know that, with the work that you do, which is what really lit you up. That's what with the work with animal welfare. If you did, I like that.
Well, I
If you
still
went too
really
much-
like doing my animal welfare stuff. I really
tell.
love doing it. And I
So
spend
good.
as much time on my animal welfare book there that might
Yes.
sell
just show
2,000
everybody.
copies as I do on my
'Cause
books for the general public.
You cleaned up today. You had so many good books, and it's so great. And I've seen them, but to see them all at once, and this is the one that I got today.
Oh, I really love this little book. Cy
let's talk about
Montgomery did
one.
this. She's such a nice lady.
I love it that your drawings are in the cover of it.
This is a great book for, the sixth graders can read this, and
Yes.
and I have kids write to me and tell me that I've motivated them, that they can really succeed.
And what like that, they're not caught up in it. That's the moniker of being autistic. They are succeeding with autism.
Well, I was 10 years old. My favorite things were my toy airplanes and all my kite experiments. I made these bird kites that I'd fly behind my trike and behind my bike, and I experimented. You know how the jet airplanes have those little winglets? When I was like 6,
Right.
I made a bird kite that had little winglets, just like the jet airplanes got, and it would make it fly at a steeper angle.
Oh, I just love that. That's what lit you up and powered you. So I have to tell you,
I spent hours working on those kites.
I bet. Do you still? What do you do to relax? You're always going.
I like to go to some movies. Like I thought Gravity was a great movie.
Oh,
There's certain movies,
so
boy, you gotta see them in a theater, like
do.
Avatar and Gravity.
Yes,
And
Gravity
there's
I did.
Other movies that are just fine on a plane.
Now, did you see it 3D? Could you see Gravity 3D? Or okay, because that was fantastic.
I did.
I love that. And then here in Colorado, I know you're teaching at CSU, at Colorado
Yes.
State University, and you never miss your classes,
Nope.
even with all the travel, which I love.
Nope, I've flown to Atlanta, flown back, did class, turned around, flew to Boston. I've done that.
But you said what? You pay attention to the tail? Is that what you're saying? That when you're flying, that you're talking about the details for
Well, I was talking about, when I did my TED Talk.
Yeah.
Okay, what had caused a bunch of airline crashes when it was mechanical problems and not the flight crew or weather, and I could put it down to one word. It was tail. It either fell off the plane, or really important things inside the tail for steering broke.
Right. And I love how you're paying attention to that. So
Yeah.
let me tell you my story. When I read your book 15 years ago, and I was so fascinated. I was fascinated with Oliver Sacks, which led me to reading your book. And at the time, I had this cat named Walter. And I read your book, and I finally said, Walter, you need your own squeezy machine. Because I would have to get that full pressure for him, and I wish I could have built him a little squeezy machine. Because when I read when you created your own, because I knew he loved tactile, but then he would get, sometimes you just couldn't stand how I touched him.
Well, you can get those Thundershirts now for cats.
I didn't have them back then, so that's for you, Walter.
The squeeze machine, I think, inspired a lot of those pressure garments. In fact, we've got a paper that I helped co-author on Thundershirt, reducing heart rate and reducing the tendency of a dog to want to just face the kennel door like waiting for somebody to come.
Sure, which I love the stress of that too. And you know what? We just juiced my computer out with all your good information and energy. I so appreciate you. You realize this is something I'm marking off my bucket list.
Well, I'm
This
glad you
moment
were
right
able to come. We were able to get together. That's
yes,
just great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're
I
very
so appreciate
welcome.
you. And to my audience, they are so excited. I'm sorry I couldn't read all that, but I will send you the link to see how many people you've inspired, not only from autism but animal activism. So thank you so much.
The thing is, we got to find practical ways to solve problems.
Yes, and you know what I loved that you said? You said, don't let bad become normal.
That's right. We
So
must not let bad become normal. Or the bulldog and things like all the osteoporosis in the laying hen, those
Yes.
are two examples of bad becoming normal.
Absolutely. I also love that there's a need for all types of minds.
Yes, there
that
is.
I just really struck me. So that's kind of my new mantra. I love that. So
The different minds can complement each other's skills. Let's take the iPhone, for example. Steve Jobs and the designers that worked on the iPhone interface and how all those icons were made, that's artist.
Yes.
The engineers had to make the inside of the phone work, but that interface on an iPhone was not designed by engineers. It was designed by an artist.
What did you say? If there were not people that were autistic, we'd still be sitting by the cave door?
Well, the thing is, who do you think invented the first stone spear? It wasn't the yakety-yaks around the campfire, that's for sure.
Telling the stories.
It would be some Asperger in the back trying to chip a stone into a spearhead.
That was my favorite thing you said on that, too. So thank you so much
thank you for
joining
having
us,
me.
and thank you for joining us with Dr. Temple Grandin. Off my bucket list. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.